Hello, everyone. I hope you're not too hot today. I'll try to make this talk a breath of fresh air. At least I'll try my best. So today we're going to talk about gauges and about resource allocation in governance, particularly in crypto. We're going to try to go from what is this basic concept and try to understand how to apply it in crypto. It's going to mainly have an impact on both governance topics and tokenomics. And the idea is to show and understand how this mechanism works and how we can strive to basically push it further and enable real DAOs, real autonomous systems. Okay, sure. So first, who am I? So you understand a bit where is this coming from. I'm one of the co-founders of Pardin. We've been building this project for close to 3 years. I used to be a banking lawyer before this, and I'm what you call a governance maximalist, which means I believe that the biggest innovation that we're seeing in crypto is actually through coordination and its replacement by smart contracts and automation in general. So what is Pardin? Pardin right now is a vote marketplace for governance tokens, and we are paradoxically building this to democratize activism. Our goal is to basically create governance engines to power more participation and more coordination in the ecosystem in general, because we're convinced that this is how crypto as a movement is going to succeed on the long term. Okay, so now that we've gone through the easy part, let's start with the hard topic, with gauges in general and resource allocation. So first, what is resource allocation? It's interesting because when you actually look at it from an academic point of view, there's 3 different sectors where you're going to hear about resource allocation. The first one is economics, which is the one we're going to focus on, but you'll also hear about it in project management and computer sciences. And it kind of has the same definition. It's just that all of these different subjects see resources as a different topic and as a different actual concrete thing. So what is resource allocation? It's basically identifying what has value, what are these resources, and how do you allocate them optimally between the different stakeholders in order to maximize the positive outcome of your project or of you in general. When you want to impress people, you say you're trying to find the most Pareto efficient outcome, but it's basically the same thing in more complex language, right? So now that we understand resource allocation, I want to basically look at what are resources in crypto and how can we allocate them to understand what we're doing today and how we could do it better probably tomorrow. Today in crypto, I've personally identified 5 types of resources. Some of you might disagree and think that one can stick with the other or there's more of them, but I've found 5 types of resources in crypto. The first one is what we call protocol ownership. Everyone, when they talk to you about valueless governance tokens, it's this. It's the decision-making power. Where is this going to lead to? Could have value, sure. You can use it as a resource. The second one is assets under management. You are a large protocol. You manage a lot of assets. This can be leveraged one way or another in order to make your protocol more efficient. One example of this is Maker, right? Maker uses part of their deposits, reinvests them in T-bills. Because of it, they make most of their revenue, and they're a cash machine today. Another example is treasury assets. You are a very wealthy protocol. You can reinvest it into your ecosystem to grow stronger. The example here, for example, is Gnosis, right? A fourth one is revenue streams. You are making a lot of money through your protocol, so this revenue stream can be used as a resource to do something. You could, for example, do debt financing, or you can do plenty of other things. Look at what Aave is doing. They're making roughly 60 million a year, and they can use this in different manners. And the fifth one, which is a bit more unconventional, but I still think it has a lot of value, is what I classified as information. So information is not just technical expertise. It can be oracles, so actual data. It can be network, if you know the right people. And all of these have value. And you, as a protocol, when you're building your protocol, your job is going to think, OK, I am creating or I am managing all of these different resources. Where should I put them and how in order to optimize not just the efficiency of the protocol, but its value for stakeholders? So how do I put people around the project that are going to want to build around it? OK, now we have these 5 resources. Now what happens with them once you have them? If you look at crypto in general and DAOs, there's 4 kind of ways that people manage them. The first one is core team. You trust someone, he basically owns the project, and he's going to allocate, the team is going to allocate the resources as they see fit. So it's a good model, but it's not new. It's called a company. Then you have 2 more, decentralized committees. This is a bit more decentralized, people can be elected, but it's much more chaotic, and we're seeing very serious limits to this model, simply because usually you have to get the people to participate, and it's hard to basically have people rotating every year. It's much closer actually to what we see nation states doing in politics when you're managing a whole country. You're going to see the government that is basically going to have like these committees, admittedly they're not decentralized, that are going to manage certain topics, right? The third one, which is kind of honestly more utopic, is DAOs, in the sense on-chain governance. Okay, you have an on-chain governor, you're using Aragon, you're using Governor Alpha. People are going to start voting with it. It's very chaotic because you have low participation rate, and on top of that, you're going to have some large stakeholders who acquire a significant amount of tokens, and it can quickly become a plutocracy. And the problem with this is that when you look at large organizations like Maker, Aave, Uniswap, they're directing everything. They're doing risk management, they're doing treasury management, they're doing almost HR integrations. The stakeholders decide on everything. And that can be a problem. And this is why today I wanted to focus on this last topic, which is gauges. Why and how, I'll come to it very quickly. But the idea of allocation resources is what tokenomics is all about today. In the end, a token only serves to allocate resources and to enable people to manage where these will go at some point. And if you look at any successful token today, they at least control one of the 5, can I go back? Yes, one of the 5 resources that I've identified before. The more of them, the better, honestly. So, okay, now we've talked about these 4. I'm going to focus on the 4th one because a lot of people already talked about the three before, so I'm here to show you the 4th one and understand why it's a very interesting mechanism. And I'm not here to show you it's a superior mechanism because that's not true for a lot of use cases, and every DAO is going to have different use cases and needs. So first, let's talk about why it's a problem in general to use governance, the 3rd one, which is the most used, as an allocation mechanism. The first thing is plutocracy. Yeah, because token voting, someone can buy the token and he can control the supply. This is a good and bad thing at the same time because the person has to buy the token first, so he creates price pressure, creates value for your protocol, but then he has the power to destroy value. So the question is, you need to align him in order to limit this. That's only the first problem because there are other problems that are done that appear with pure on-chain governance. The second one, which I mentioned just before, is the fact that people can easily create conflict of interest simply because there is little silo. Today in crypto, most of the delegates do not declare conflict of interest, so you never know if they invested into another project, if they co-founded it, if they have friends over there, which creates risk. And the third one, which is kind of even more tragic, is simply that governance is very chaotic and very inefficient. So there's this kind of paradox when small projects need to be very dynamic in order to pivot and evolve, but they have the bureaucracy and the slowness of DAOs. And the truth that we're starting to realize today is that you actually need to be a large and successful project to run an efficient DAO, because you need the funds to sustain that system, but to have these funds, you need to build a successful protocol. So you're kind of stuck in between when you're looking at these. So what you want to do as a builder in general is you're going to want to avoid all of this politics at the beginning, simply because they're going to drain a lot of your time that you would need to actually build a successful project. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't be decentralized or not listening to token holders or stakeholders in general, right? What it means is that there are much more efficient ways to do so. And one of these, personally for me, is what we call gauges, that was introduced by Curve. So what are gauges and why are they interesting? They're a very different choice at the end of the spectrum because they're predetermined. What most projects do today when they do it, for example, with emissions, is that they decide on a specific rule, so a specific amount they're going to emit, for example, every week. And what they're doing with this is that they're saying, okay, if we do it this way, it's going to be trustless because we're going to put everything on smart contracts, and the smart contracts are going to manage everything. So there's one vote, for example, that decides how much and where the gauges are going to direct, and that's it. It's basically just a trustless distribution mechanism. Where it becomes interesting is that it's market-driven. So in economics, you kind of have two allocation theses. One of them is around command economics, and the other is about market-driven economics. So you choose whether one core entity is going to decide where these allocations go, or if the market is going to choose. Here with gauges, if you have, for example, V tokens or lock tokens that are controlling these, it's purely market-driven. But you're asking all the stakeholders to align by locking their token for multiple years. So you are market-driven, but aligned with most of the users. And that's the whole point. The whole point is to create a system of allocation that is decentralized, trustless, but also market-driven in the interest of the project. So the idea is, how do you create an ebb and flow that's going to go in the direction of growing your protocol? And that's why gauges are interesting mechanism for, because they ask much less work once they are put in place. They work by themselves, and they're much more efficient at creating a community and enabling people to build on top of you. Now, why are they important? There's something that's very dear to me to explore on this. It's what we call the unbundling of governance. One big mistake we've all done over the past 10 years, a bit less, while working around decentralized governance, is we think that we should have one governance to manage everything, or we're going to put 10 committees with 11 people in each committee. That's very limited in terms both of resources, human resources, and in terms of time and efficiency, right? So what's really cool about gauges is you can focus, for example, on one specific type of resource allocation or multiple, and just push this in a trustless manner and separate this. So for example, if you're a lending protocol, you can have a risk management committee or a risk management sub-DAO, and at the same time, you could have gauges that are going to manage your revenue sharing system, or they're going to manage how you do emissions. And the interesting is that you're basically unbundling all the different systems of governance you have and separating them into different modules that can be much more efficiently managed. So that's very important. Now, to understand something we're seeing rising a lot that can seem dangerous, and that's part of what we're building at Paladin and why we're building it, is that we're realizing that command economics do not work in crypto, and especially in DeFi today. Why? Because there is a lack of skilled participants, lack of delegates. There is a lack of interest amongst most stakeholders. There is a lack of alignment between most stakeholders and projects. So the problem with command economics right now, may it be on-chain governance or committees, especially in this market, we can see it, is that they're very inefficient and they're very slow, and sometimes they're totally inactive. So the difference is that if you're going to go into a free market system, for example, like gauges, what you create is organic activity. If the prices goes too low, you're going to have people who are going to come in, understand the net value of the system, and come into it. And that's why we're saying that most of the projects that actually have gauges have a much more steadfast approach to the way they handle the bear market. That's the first part. The second part is that about growth. Once it's trustless and permissionless, it means that it's much easier to build on top of it. And the problem of governance is that it's unpredictable, right? Gauges are the opposite. You know the rules, you know how they're going to play over the next years, so it's much easier to build on top of it because it's very predictable. And predictability has a lot of value, and that's something we don't talk enough about. So basically, once you're building vote markets, which we are doing today, you're creating exponential utility for the underlying because you're traducing one resource into financial value. So non-aligned stakeholders, instead of actually destroying value in the project, can just opt out and create and sell the value to people who actually create the value because they see the interest in doing so. And this is something we've been doing for the past over a year. We've redistributed roughly $6 million to different stakeholders. So it's something where we're seeing a lot of success, and we've slowly become more and more aligned with most of the projects that we work with on this. To the point that today, I think we have at Paladin, we have something like 3 integrations on 3 projects on top of which we're integrated, and we have 21 integrations coming over the next few months. So it's a choice of system, allocation system, where we're seeing a lot of success, and where we expect a lot more, simply because trustless allocation mechanisms are much more cypherpunk in general, and much more efficient than what we're seeing today, where there's a lot of people who are going to try to push the governance forward, but they're not going to agree, and they're always going to have various interests that are going to make the protocol much less trustless than it actually is in its original state. Okay, so one last thing on this. We have an asset that we're trying to deploy on top of all of this system, and the idea is that we're trying to create a global allocation booster. The idea is that all of the projects who are trying to test this system, they can basically integrate on top of our marketplace, and what we'll do is that we'll distribute part of our revenue and our own resources to basically align more stakeholders and get more people in this kind of system. And the more we have this success, the more we have this flywheel going on, the more we hope that projects will integrate this, simply because we're seeing a net benefit into the effective growth of these projects. Okay. I have a bit more time, so if you have questions after this, but really some final words in general about gauges. So the two things. First one is that what I said is not about governance and it's as a final solution. There is no solution. The solution for your own project is that you're going to have to understand what the resources are, and you're going to have to find how to allocate optimally. So to who do you want to give it to and in which manner. If you can find a trustless model, I highly advise that you actually implement it, simply because it will be much more efficient and you'll be able to focus on your work, which is your actual protocol. Sometimes your token is, is a protocol for yourself, but it's very rarely the actual core thesis. And a lot of people who have released token realize really quickly that it's a time sink and it's not their core work. When you release governance, try to unbundle it. That's very important, simply because it's going to be much more efficient. What we realize very quickly is that there are very different thematics, and having 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 large delegates does not make your governance efficient, because the delegate might be an expert in one topic, but he's not going to know risk management and treasury allocation and HR and et cetera, et cetera. These are very different topics. There is a reason why people have specific jobs with specific specialty. And it's very complicated, because once people slowly get into power, it can be difficult to unravel, especially as you build a decentralized project, because as a founding team, you don't own 90% of the project. You slowly get diluted, which is the whole point. But that means you lose control. And unbundling governance and allocating the right mechanism and the right people for each of these specific types is extremely important for the durability of your project. Last but not least, gauges, but I call them trustless allocation system, are one of the most powerful driving forces of network effects. What does it mean? And we've seen this with the success of Curve, despite all the complications they've seen over the past months. There's an extreme resilience, not only of the protocol in itself, but also of the community that's built around it, because a lot of people were incentivized to build on top of it and for the project to succeed. Now, that is what everyone wants to build in crypto. A primitive, they want to build something that is deeply integrated and that can actually work on a very fundamental level. And gauges are a way for projects to basically enable this. That's it. Thank you very much. If you have questions, please go ahead. And if you're interested in exploring, I put a QR code so you can just join our community.
There's a question.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Really interesting. Can you please dive a little bit deeper into the use cases, concrete use cases of gauges? What do you think sort of issues could be solved on-chain through these mechanisms?
So I really simplified it when I called resource allocation. But for me, the 5 things that can be solved with this are basically, I would say, more around it's not assets, it's what's used under the assets of management. So basically, which strategies, what are you going to do with treasury? That can be done. How are you going to distribute treasury assets, if you ever do? Around revenue sharing and revenue streams, where are they going to go? And around information. So that's something a bit more interesting and deep that hasn't been done a lot. There was a post, I think it was actually written by Vitalik on the Uniswap forums roughly 2 years ago, where he offered that the Uni token should become an Oracle token. So the idea was Uniswap has a specific bandwidth of time-weighted oracles they can distribute, and the more a Uni was staked into one LP gauge pair, basically, the more recent and recurrent the oracle would be refreshed. It was never done. I think that's a real shame, but it would have value because it means you would basically pay Uniswap holders to get a strong oracle through their Uniswap LP pool. So you have an incentive in having deep liquidity on Uniswap, and you have an incentive in using this as your oracle. There's a ton of very creative things that haven't been done, but when you're building your protocol, the assets that are going to be deposited and what you do with them can mean that you're basically creating a resource in one way or another. For example, as I mentioned before, Maker and what they're doing with treasury builds, you have what I just talked about with Uniswap and DLPs, but the more you dive into it, the more you realize that you can do something. For example, if you have a locker that's having governance assets, what's done with the actual governance of these assets? You can have what they call meta-governance. Index tried this a few years ago too. It's a lot about creativity and about finding what you're going to do with the resources that you're basically creating in your protocol.
Thank you. We have more.
Yeah, I was just wondering how gauges are different from the Allo protocol by Gitcoin.
From Bitcoin?
Gitcoin,
Oh.
Allo protocol is a permissionless way of distributing funds, and they focus a lot on like allocations. I was just wondering, what is the distinction between Allo protocol created by Gitcoin versus gauges and what you've made?
So I am not extremely familiar. I've heard about Allo protocol. I don't know exactly how they work. To my knowledge, Allo protocol is basically quadratic funding and distribution, right?
It's one of the payout strategies. You can like kind of decide whether it will be just a simple pass-through grant, whether it will be one person, one vote, quadratic, but it's like just a way to allocate resources and money in a permissionless manner.
So here, gauges, I'm inspiring a lot from what Curve has built, because I believe that having stakeholders align on the long term actually makes them much more sensible participants. So if you have alignment plus delegation, you get into an interesting thing. I do not think that both of these are for the same thing. Our protocol seems really efficient around grants, maybe potentially funding. What I'm talking about here is not, it could work, but I don't know, I'd have to compare it on paper, but here it's more for internal assets that projects already have. Maybe our protocol could be tweaked and used for gauges. It's good. We need permissionless frameworks to do so. We've tried to recode a bit what has been done before to offer it to other projects. Anyone is free if they want, we can share the access to the GitHubs. But in general, we're likely going to see some open source framework for these, just not today because we're really at the beginning of exploring how to trustlessly allocate resources.
Any more questions? Yeah. Thank you.